Welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, and today I'll be talking about the usage of tarot in the 1996 movie The Craft. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. The best way to support the podcast right now is to listen daily, rate, review, and to follow or subscribe in your chosen podcast app. The next best way is to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/everydaytarot. I just added some new benefits, and so the link is in the show notes if you want to check that out. You can always go to my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot for all the latest information related to the podcast and to find images of the cards that I pull. That's the only place that you can find those. If you're local to the greater Puget Sound area, I'd love to see you at one of my Let's Talk Tarot meetup group events where we all bring some of our favorite decks and play around with tarot and oracle decks together. Our next meetup is on March 10th at 5 p.m. at Township 20 in Sumner. You can use the meetup link to check out details on upcoming events. All right, so we're into season 4 of the podcast. In the first season, I did sort of tarot basics. In seasons 2 and 3, I talked about the major arcana and the 4 suits, one per episode. And this season, I'm talking all about tarot in pop culture. And as I said, today I'm talking about the usage of tarot in the movie The Craft. So some background on The Craft. It came out in 1996. So as a 90s kid, I definitely watched this movie when I was a kid. It's sort of like new girl moves to town. She doesn't really have any friends. She's trying to, find some friends, befriend some new girls. She becomes into sort of like magic and the occult. And then sort of things go wrong quickly. And we sort of see that throughout the movie. And then she sort of finds her way in the end when it comes to the magical realm. So that's kind of background on the movie. And I will have spoilers for this movie if you haven't seen it. It's pretty great if you're witchy. So feel free to go ahead and watch that and then come back to the episode if you haven't seen it before. So I found a great YouTube video by Laura Hochstad of Rue Mork TV. They have a YouTube video entitled Who Does Tarot Better, The Craft or Tamara? And she goes through, it's a fairly short video, but talking about tarot in these 2 different movies. So again, The Craft came out in 1996, the other one came out in 2006, I think, and had very similar sort of, at least like plot lines around like new girl moves to town, tries to make friends, falls into magic, things go wrong, finds her magical thing in the end. And they both have some tarot in them. And so I'll just sort of focus on the first part of the video, but she talks about that in the opening sequence of The Craft, the movie, we sort of see these different things, and there's like a blink and you'll miss it moment where we see a tarot card. And it's the Hierophant card, specifically from the Thoth deck by Aleister Crowley. It's a pretty famous deck. It's seen as a specifically advanced deck by many tarot readers. It is well known, so sometimes people get it and then they get it and they're like, oh, like actually I would need to like practice a lot to really understand this deck. So some decks are just like that. I'm going to have a whole season on different decks in the future. So maybe I'll talk about it then. But yeah, so we see this card, the Hierophant, and the Hierophant is seen as the ultimate teacher. And so it's interesting that we have sort of our like main character, protagonist, Sarah. She kind of shows up at school, to this new school, new place. She's like lost. She's not kind of befriends these new girls. And then Nancy, one of the girls, becomes her mentor in this like magical sense. And then things go wrong quickly. Sort of interesting because I would say generously Nancy practices like chaos magic, or I guess she maybe talks about later like blood magic. There's different kinds. So that's kind of what happens with her, and then she kind of falls into things very quickly. They start to practice magic as a group of 4, and start to, things just kind of go awry again. Like, I'm not going to get into it too much, but later in the movie, so once Sarah's sort of like fallen out of favor with those girls or feels like she's in over her head, she finds like another mentor. So another, like, again, kind of seeking this like teacher. She searches again. She finds Lero, who's the owner of the magic shop that's like in town or nearby. And Lero is this sort of stand-in in the film as like her mother figure at the time, this mentor for her. It's sort of interesting because Lero looks, I would say, like a quintessential like hippie. She's wearing like long, flowy things that all look like natural fabrics, and she's got like long hair and just like a very different magic than Nancy practices as a 16-year-old who's into kind of more like dresses like goth. And yeah, she kind of has this like, I would say like interest in the more like chaos magic of things. Um, so really we see Sarah like seeking like these teachers, these mentors. And so she does find this in Lyra, and that's helpful, especially when she kind of gets in over her head with magic with her friends. She kind of seeks Lyra out as like, okay, like please help me, like what can I do? And she sort of leads her around in the shop and teaches her some things. And then we have sort of at the end of the film, and again, like spoilers if you haven't seen it, but we sort of get this full archetype of the Hierophant with Sarah is like her actual mother. So at the end of the film, it's not until she channels her mother's like spirit, her mother's energy, that she's able to harness her full powers as a witch. And maybe like this is what she was searching for the whole time. It's also interesting to note that like the other girls that practice magic in the film, like the ones that are in sort of this like coven or cult together, they practice magic of different kinds, but then like when they do so, it's sort of like the universe like takes their magic away from them because it's like they've gone too far or it kind of goes to their head. But in the end of the film, we have this moment where the other girls are sort of like trying to talk to Sarah again, and they're like, "Hey, like, if you want to like hang out," or like they're trying to be nice to her again and like casual, even though they sort of discarded her earlier in the film. And they like ask her casually, like, "Oh, like, do you still have your magic? Because like we don't." And she's sort of like doesn't really say much, and then she kind of just says like, go away, but in a different way to them. Like she doesn't really want to have anything to do with them. And we sort of get this like knowing look from her of like, I still have my magic, and like I was able to harness my full powers as a witch, like channeling her mother's energy. And again, that's sort of she like finds her own place. And that's sort of like where we end there. So I guess so that's kind of like that part with that card. There's also another part earlier in the film. It's sort of like early on when the girls all find each other and they're like, cool, okay. And it's sort of like each of the four characters practices different kinds of magic. And so we get like when they're together, they all sort of like can amplify each other's powers. But we see like the girls go out into the forest and they have like an altar, they have like candles, they have runes, they have tarot cards, they call in the four directions. There's like different things that go on. But on the altar, we see this tarot card of the Empress. Um, and with the Empress and also some runes. And so the Empress is like the ultimate mother figure, protector, sometimes like the guidance we look for growing up. It's like an early card in the major arcana. Um, so if the Hierophant is all about like the sacred mystery, sort of like the mysticism, like again, like the mentoring and or like witchy capacity. Again, historically, sometimes it's depicted as like the Pope, so like this religious, like figure or like interpretation from God or from the universe. The Empress is more about like nurturing, safety, again, sort of like an ideal parental figure. They sort of soothe your worries. We're safe and protected. We have abundance. Um, yeah, almost like Mother Gaia, like again like Mother Nature, like a lot of those sort of I guess like metaphors or analogies come along with this. So, right, we think about like, are you feeling safe, reassured, and abundant? What part of your life might need nurturing, love, and protection right now? Are you able to access the fearless place within you where love resides? Often the Empress is depicted as sitting in like an abundant garden and sort of like on a throne, but like in a very like natural setting. And so And this is from the book Fearless Tarot by Elliot Adam that I was pulling from for these aspects. But we get this, and it's sort of interesting because, like, as we get towards the end of the film, it seems like the type of magic that Sarah embodies is like a more natural magic. So, like, pulled from, I guess, like nature. I think she, like, when she's like calling in her mother, it's like a storm. So instead of some of the other types of magic that the other characters practice, and I'll talk about one of the other characters in a moment, Rochelle, who's the one that practices tarot sort of in the film, and we'll find out in real life. So we get these runes and also the Empress, and the rune that's depicted. So runes are another divination tool, and so the rune depicted has to do with the elements of protection. So this seems right in line with the Empress card. So runes, if you don't know, are another divination tool that can be traced as far back as 800 BCE during the Viking Age, specifically in like Denmark and Norway. And the stones are based on an ancient alphabet. Each of the carvings have like a certain meaning. It's not just like a letter. I guess it depicts a letter, but each one sort of has this greater meaning. So this is another way to sort of divine the future runes. There's lots of different ways. Of course, on this podcast, we talk about tarot, but as I get into further seasons, we'll talk about sort of larger themes around divination as well. And so, yeah, the last thing I wanted to talk about, which is less to do about what's depicted in the film and more about magic, perhaps in real life or in our lessons learned and meaning section, is that Rachel True, one of the actors in the craft, practices tarot in real life. So she plays Rochelle in the movie. It's sort of interesting. She is Black and she's with these like three other girls that are very white. This actress has gone on to sort of talk about what she thinks it might have looked like if everyone, like if the sort of the four girls depicted were Black and sort of the different like themes or ideologies or even magic that would have been depicted in that way. So I'll put some links in the show notes for some of the things she's talked about, but she is a tarot reader in real life. It sounds like since she was a kid, even before being in the film, and that she really kind of wished that she had been able to have a bigger role in the film. She talks about being cast aside as like the quirky best friend and like definitely you're not the main character, which often happens to folks of color, especially when their main character is white, and that she really says that, like, oh yeah, she was into magic and tarot and the occult like prior to the movie. She actually has her own tarot deck, and I think she wrote a book, True Heart Tarot. So I'll have all those links in the show notes, but I just thought that was interesting too. I know for the film they consulted, like the filmmakers consulted with at least like a Wiccan practitioner, and so like I think that the cards depicted in the film are probably fairly accurate. It seems like a good depiction, even though we don't get a lot of it. So I would say maybe like an 8 out of 10. If 10 is like, oh, the best depiction of tarot in film, and 1 is like, oh, one not so great or not super authentic. But I love that like one of the actors, one of the main four, like does practices tarot in real life. And again, like very cool to think that she was able to kind of like be in this movie, even though she didn't have a huge role, and sort of portray like a real witch in a movie about witches and teenagers trying to find like their own power. So that's kind of, we'll keep it short today. But yeah, check out the movie if you haven't seen it before. Check out Rachel True's stuff, her tarot deck. And there's great articles that she's been featured in, talking about it, talking about the film, talking about her experience, talking about tarot. And so let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today. All right, so I'm pulling from the Desert Illuminations Tarot deck by Lindsay D. Williams, and I pulled the 7 of Cactus, and cactus in this deck are like pentacles or coins or spirals. So it says, a classic car drives through a lush portion of Route 66 chasing after a UFO. The cacti on this route bloom after the springtime monsoon season, which is symbolic of successful cultivation. A vibrant sunset in the distance casts a vibe of looking through rose-colored glasses. The UFO in the distance represents the guiding forces leading you on the right path with your projects. This card is about being on the right track and thinking about what your long-term goals hold for you. Like the open road, there's a sense of freedom after putting in all the hard work. When we are driving, we are forced to stay in the present moment and to make sure we are safely observing everything around us. This card encourages you to focus on your journey and the road ahead. If you get stuck in traffic, be patient. You will get to your destination. So it sounds like, right, things are happening. We're thinking about long-term goals right now. We're planning. We're, again, thinking about the road ahead and the journey. And there might be roadblocks or, like I said, traffic on the way. But you're going to get there in the end. So, all right. Thanks for the tarot decks I talk about. Will always be in the show notes and on my website if you'd like to look at them or find where to purchase them. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast comes out daily, Monday through Friday for all of 2025. All right. See you soon. Bye-bye.